All right. Hello, everyone. My name is Dr. Amber Kea-Edwards. I have a PhD in positive organizational psychology. I am a researcher, practitioner, and scholar and teacher. So let me just break down what organizational psychology is. Organizational psychology looks at the individual, team, and organizational level structures within an organization in a way that hopefully allows the organization to thrive and to be better. Better is a big loaded term, right? Are we talking about the bottom line? Are we talking about societal impact? Are we talking about environmental impact? That may differ depending on the scholar. When we're talking about individual, team, and organizational level, let me just quickly break that down for you. As an organizational psychologist, looking at the individual level, I might look at how personality, emotions, or motivation may impact business success. At the team level, I might look at conflict, communication, and team dynamics and how they interact with the organization for organizational success. And at the organizational level, I may look at culture, policies, and practices and how those things might impact business success. Okay, and so the biggest difference here is that depending on your POV, your point of view, an organizational psychologist could go in many different ways about defining what organizational success is, like I hinted to. When you're looking at organizational success through bottom line, through making money, then a lot of your claims in your research and in your practice will go from, okay, well, we need to make this change or intervene here in order to make the company more money. And in this way, if even if we're talking about well-being, employee well-being, we would attach how employee well-being may reduce turnover, which in turn saves you money and increases your bottom line in a way. When we have the bottom line as the definition of organizational success, it frames our scope and our narrative and the questions that we ask and the way we answer them. For me, as an organizational psychologist, I know to play the game. I know that money is what a corporation is. You know, at the heart of a corporation, corporations are these faceless, soulless, moralless institutions that are here to produce money for very few, a group of individuals. And although that is very dystopian to think about and very unfortunate, and as a positive psychologist, you know, I wouldn't want that to be the case. Ignoring it would be naive and unhelpful. However, playing in this game fully and really only thinking about the bottom line will also just not, I don't want to do that. So there's just a lot more depth in things that aren't tied to the bottom line that I would be interested in. I want to just briefly share with you a presentation that I guess is incomplete. I'm going back to through my Google Drive, which is full of like a wealth of knowledge, and I'm putting it out there. Some of it's incomplete, some of it is complete, and I may have presented it at a conference before. And I'm sharing it on the World Wide Web to cre create a communication line between me and people that are not in academia that aren't my students. And so this presentation specifically, I'm glad that you've sat with me to learn about what organizational psychology is, whether you're interested in it as a field, or you just never knew it and you just are interested as a learner. I'm going to now also share with you something new. So, as I stated, my POV is not necessarily about the bottom line. Actually, my POV is about employee empowerment. That's what I'm about. I'm about employee empowerment. And the reason why I'm about that is because what I've recognized is a lot of employees, including myself, I got knocked down to my butt to be able to realize this, is that we are not taught how to be empowered and that it's important to be empowered. A lot of the rhetoric is about getting a job and kind of basically kissing up to an employer in order to maintain your status. And I just don't want that for us. So let's go into it. Let me share my screen and jump into it. All right. Perfect. All right. So this is the role of positive racial identity in leader identity development. Within my PhD, I specialize in leader development. Okay. Leader development is an individual consideration of how one person develops leadership capacity, skills, and abilities. Okay. A lot of the literature, majority of the literature is white male dominated. And this matters because it's white male dominated, but also it's through the lens of a white male as well, which means that when we take a step back and look at the American corporation, historically, and history matters, historically the ideal leader and the ideal worker is white and male. And so when they conceive of how to develop leadership skills, they're conceiving it as being the prototype of what the organizations want. There is no friction, there's less friction for a white male to engage in certain processes to be seen as effective than for a white female, than for a black male, than for a black female, and so on and so forth. Also, sexuality gets into play. Also, even being overweight or being perceived as unhealthy. There's a lot of different things that can make you not the prototype. But majority of the research and the practice of how to develop leaders do not take into account those elements. Specifically, as a Black woman, I look at race and gender often intersecting. However, what I'm sharing with you today is about race. Okay, so when we take a step back, we can look at the US presidents, okay, and we can see the prototype of what leadership looks like. We can take a step back and look at the CEOs of Fortune 500 companies. We can take a step back and look at, just companies in general within the United States that bring in a significant amount of revenue are have a penchant towards one race over the other overwhelmingly. And we do have data, you can maybe argue, well, they're the most interested or they're the most qualified. And unfortunately, I think that story would be easier to say and would not be as hurtful and harmful if that were the truth. But unfortunately, we do know and have data that that is not the case. But this is not this lecture, so let's move on. Don't know what that slide is about. Okay, don't know what the slide is about. I mean, I do. It's a lifelong journey of leader identity. So one of the things is, I'm sorry, one of the things with leader development is identity, and identity is a part of my research portfolio or POV, if you will. Identity is the way you see yourself. And if you did grow up in America as someone who isn't white or male, and you might be struggling if you're a white male, okay, but if you grew up seeing that you do not represent the prototype of what a leader is supposed to be, and even introverts have this issue versus extroverts, it gets deep. There's many different layers. We're talking about race here. Stay focused, right? But when you grow up and you see that who you represent physically is not represented in the role of a leader, the identification of being a leader may be weaker. This is a really good example when you grow up as a woman, as a young girl, and you may have qualities that show a propensity towards leadership. For example, initiating structures, the first to speak in a meeting or in a friend group, someone to create guidelines. These are some things that we see our young girls doing, and oftentimes we count that as bossy. And we use that in a derogatory way to kind of shift those young girls away from that. But essentially that is exactly what we're looking for as a leader. And so we already see that. And then eventually over time, this young girl might grow up and say that she's not a leader. She might not see herself as a leader, even though she has been executing effective leadership skills her whole entire life, essentially. But not being able to see it in media and then having her direct circle and direct people around her kind of condemn her when she even shows signs of that, and she might not even be aware of this, could cause that disconnect. When you don't identify as a leader, you're less likely to go for leadership opportunities. You're less likely to put yourself out there for that. And subsequently, people are less likely to see you as a leader as well. Here's where the racial identity theory comes into play. And I remember the reason why I did this work is because is on the heels of, and there's typos throughout this. I don't know when I did this. This was when I was in my young 20s, bless my heart. But the impetus of this work is that microaggressions, racial microaggressions, they can reduce, they can't go away because who knows who's going to be at your workplace. And hiring and recruitment and hiring have yet to place a very big premium on the character of a person. We have yet to see big sweeping trends on hiring individuals who are culturally competent. Regardless of what the job title is, it's like, okay, we are not hiring anyone that's not culturally competent. We make them go through a test and we make them go through implicit bias training before they even get to, work with us. That's not a trend. And so what we have is people can be very great in their technical skill in their position and be completely and woefully ignorant, disconnected, and just downright disengaged with anything that doesn't have anything to do with them. So racial microaggressions can happen. Like, yeah, I'm surprised to see you here. I don't usually see, black people in positions like this, says a white person. Or like, oh yeah, I thought that you were Marcus because you guys just look just alike. Um, just these very small gestures of invalidation, these small gestures of lack of belonging, those things classify as racial microaggressions. Okay, well, so what's the point? On the screen, it says racial identity theory. Well, how did the two go together? And I got slack from this, mostly from white colleagues, but some from black colleagues as well. But in my POV, remember, I'm empowering employees. I am. I know y'all want to fix the organization. Good. Please do it. Go. Like, do that. For me, I don't want to tell the people that are in my life that's struggling with microaggressions, hey, just wait for your employer to get it together and just pray that it happens in your lifetime. I don't want that as the solution. So my solution, what I was thinking that actually helped me because I graduated from a historically black university, Winston-Salem State University in North Carolina. And it was a very efficacious experience for me. I was the healthiest in my mind without the most mental toll. I just really felt solid and secure in who I was. I was being represented from the top to the bottom, and I really felt like what I wanted to do, I could do it. Immediately after graduating, I went to a private graduate only institution in Southern California that was predominantly historically white serving. And this culture shock being from North Carolina to California, major. I was 22 or just turned 21, horrible. And there was a lot of microaggressions. I also got called the N-word, not by a classmate, thank God that would have been horrible. Well, actually, well, there was a lot of microaggressions, a lot of pain, a lot of racial pain, a lot of racial trauma, a lot of hurt. And the only things that got me through it and not under the freaking bed, under the freaking mud, was me reconnecting to the strength of who I am with my racial identity. What's happening here is because certain institutions have historically prioritized and uplifted certain groups, those groups' values and ideals are put on a pedestal. And so in my historically white serving institution in graduate school, certain values that come from like white and male or masculine qualities, white ideals, etc., were something that was an expectation. Whereas my cultural values as a Southern Black woman were so far like, no. Every time I said bless my heart, and this is a very small example, but every time I said bless my heart, people would just be like, oh my gosh, that's so cute. Like, the value that I had as a Black person was not valued in that system. And I'm not saying bless your heart is a Black value, but I'm saying when you're in a situation that is heavy with microaggressions of any sort, it's mostly because there's a dominant cultural value that is not yours and that's not diverse. And so when I was stronger on understanding, yeah, I am black. I'm not ashamed of it. But also, there's so much wealth and beauty that I know other people may not ever see in their lifetime. They may never see, in my black community experience, being black in the South, one of my favorite parts is getting together with a group of people and we're all like so engaged in the conversation. We're all kind of like talking really fast and loud, maybe talking a little bit over each other. And that is like one of my fondest memories growing up, doing that with my family and friends and just getting really wrapped up. Wherein white culture, maybe being a little quieter and, my turn and then you talk and then this very linear thing, it bores me. It's not my value, but it was very much, prized. There's a lot of other things that I could get into and you can name in the description and the comments as well. But overall, in my physical environment, I was getting, not only the microaggressions, but physical cues that, my race is not valued. And what I was hypothesizing and theorizing is that as you go on your racial identity journey, you start to grow a sense of self and appreciation that's internal and unbreakable. So that when some random person that just happened to get hired that has to work in your office says some bull, you don't take it as face value because you don't care because this person would likely never know your cultural values because they don't care about your culture. And that's fine because they don't pay your bills and that's fine. And people didn't like that as much because it's like, it's not fine. It's not, the my white colleagues that didn't like it's like, that's not fine though. It's not good to have microaggressions. Yeah, yeah. You know what I mean? Like when you are, in a community that has been systemically marginalized, that resting on these hopes underneath this rainbow and then getting this pot of gold is just something that, to each his own, but I didn't have time for. And I knew every single time I learned more about my history, I learned more about the first Black people to get PhDs. I learned about all the people that got PhDs that were Black. And I just like kind of kept doing that. And then they were talking about their own Black issues. And I just kept getting myself more indoctrinated into my racial identity and what it means to me. I was able to take that journey through that historically serving white institution and it was more fulfilling and I couldn't have done it with better health if I didn't have a strong racial identity, and that's the situation here. And I don't really have that much more time to talk, but I will share what's on the screen. Racial identity theories assume that race and racial categories are societal social constructs that have intra individual and personal level psychological implications. So what this means is that, you know, when someone says something is a social construct, that means that unlike gravity, right? Gravity is not a social construct. So if we all get together, I know we can't get together on shit, but if we happen to just all get together, as you know, U.S. people in the nation, and say, hey, let's make it so that gravity stops at like 10 p.m. so we can fly during the night and we all agree. I know it'll be a miracle, impossible that we all agree. But if we all agree, and I'm thinking maybe, but no, if we all agree, gravity stops at 10 p.m. and that's just what it's going to be for the next 100 years. Gravity ain't going to stop because it's not a social construct. That's an actual, real scientific thing. Your ass jump off that tree if you want to, just because we all said it. You're going to fall down to the ground. You're not going to fly. If we all get together, like I said, not gonna happen. We are definitely disjointed. We're not getting together on shit. We can't even get together on not a damn thing. But if we were able to get together and all say something like with gender, there are three genders, or there are no genders, or there's no such thing as race. If we were able to agree on that, there would be no such thing as race. I know it would never happen. I'm not saying it would, but what I'm saying is, unlike gravity, if we said, hey, just because your skin is brown doesn't mean you're black, just because your skin is pale doesn't mean you're white, we actually don't give a shit about that. We're just all human. And that's the only thing that matters. There is no thing of race. Then there would be no thing of race because race is a social construct. That's what they mean when they say that, okay? You know, take it or leave it or take it. So again, there's no scientific meaning or significant shared genetic histories. It's just social history. So this is a social phenomenon. They're socialized messages that begin in adolescence, and there may be cases to say even before, and some empirical researchers to say even before, that create groups in America, that certain groups in America receive negative racial socialization messages. Some receive positive racial socialization messages. Some receive no racial socialization messages, and that's an experience in and of itself as as a person within the United States. So a healthy racial identity involves replacing internalized racial messages that you may have gotten, especially if you're a Black person, that you got from media, from the news, from the history of the United States that try to put Black individuals down or in a box, etc., etc. And then you replace them with more realistic messages about yourself and your group and the strength and the value that you see within it. So that's all I have time for today. But if you like this video, if you don't, who cares? I'll keep making it, keep sharing it, keep bridging the gap. This is the things that we talk about in academia. This is what I've likely shared an iteration of this in an academic conference. If we didn't have anti-DEI and I can't talk about race and gender and stuff like that without thinking I'm gonna get my ass beat with my employer. So, this is an outlet even for me to engage with people who care, not even just people who care, but who are stakeholders. For me, as a Black woman, diversity is central because if I didn't care about diversity, I couldn't teach because majority of my students do not look like me. I have to practice diversity and I do it well. I look at my students like, I don't know who the hell y'all are. I don't give a fuck if you white or Black or this or that. I don't know who you are. I have to get to know you individually, see who you are, and teach to that. And when we keep people in boxes, it's just not right. It's not cool. I hate it. But y'all keep being that if you want. You're probably not here. You probably couldn't stay if you're not. So if you stay this long, give me a thumbs up. And yes, there's more to come, but we don't got time for that today. Thank you for listening and see you next time.